custom dye your puppet fleece is a really, really great skill to have as a puppet builder. We need to dye some fleece today in the Swazzle Puppet Studio, so we thought we would go live and show you the process, what it's like from start to finish. And you'll see that dyeing your own custom puppet fleece is not quite as difficult or intimidating as you might think. Now the good thing is, once you start dyeing your own puppet fleece, it really starts to open up doors. You're not limited by what is available at the store. You could get an infinite number of colors for your puppets. And by the way, if you're a mascot maker, if you're making suits, if you're doing cosplay, this tutorial hopefully will be useful to you as well. During the process, there is some time that we'll take some questions, especially when I'm starting to get into the actual mixing of the material. So if you have questions about dyeing puppet fleece, or you want to know more, you can go ahead and drop those in the comments, and we'll get to those questions as soon as we have time. So for starters, let's talk about what you need to dye some puppet fleece. First thing you'll need is the material you want to dye. Now, I have this material because this is the color that I'm hoping to match. Now, matching colors is challenging. We'll see if I can do it. But you'll need the material. So right now, the material I have is right here. It's white puppet fleece, and you'll notice it is in a pot of cool, clear water. That's something else you'll need. You'll need a pot of water. You'll also need another pot to do your dyeing in. Now you could do this stovetop. You could do this in the washing machine. What we have here is basically a lobster pot and a hot plate. So we have that boiling, and you can see here the water is hot and ready to begin. You'll also need something like, these are like chemical gloves. They're heat resistant. So heat resistant gloves, which are also waterproof. That's helpful. Some sort of spoon to stir. Kitchen tongs to handle the material when it's hot and wet, and to help mix it around and agitate it. Some measuring spoons. We happen to be doing powder dye today. If you're doing liquid dye, maybe you might want to change into liquid measuring spoons, but we like to use these. And then the whatever dye that you're using. So today, this is just the box. Today we'll be using this tan by Rit and Petal Pink by Rit. And we're attempting to get like a peachy light skin tone. That's our goal today. And so the way I'm going to try that is I'm going to go 2 to 1. I'm going to go 2 tans to 1 pink. And I'm going to start fairly on the lighter side. I'll start with the ½ teaspoon. And then we'll put it in, we'll agitate it for a period of time, we'll check the color, see how it looks, and then we can always add more dye. Now this is the puppet fleece, this is the softer puppet fleece. This is not F3. One thing I've noticed, that when you dye F3, it takes the dye very quickly. So it's actually better to build the color up slowly. Even if you want a rich color, like we were dyeing something, we wanted to be a bold color, so we put a lot of dye in the bath, we put the F3 in, and it still dyed unevenly. So what we're noticing is it grabs the dye so fast that if you want a rich color, it's still better to build that up slowly. Now, we don't have that issue with this particular dye, but I mean with this particular material, but this is just some of the things that we've discovered working with different fleeces. So one of the most important things you have to know is that your material should go into the dye bath wet. So you want this material to be fully saturated with water. Now, the reason why you want it to go in wet is if it goes in dry, it will dye unevenly. It will be blotchy. Um, because the moisture will suck up the first area that it finds and it won't distribute evenly. But if it goes in wet, then the dye will disperse throughout the whole surface of the fabric and it will dye more evenly. Now, you don't want it to be dripping, you want it to be, get a lot of the water out and then transfer it. We're also working on one of these bar mats. There is quite a bit of water involved in all this, so you want to do something so that you're not just accidentally spilling water all over your work surface or your floor. All right, so our water has been boiling. By the way, hot tip, I didn't know this, but someone told it to me. To get water to boil faster, put a lid on it. Apparently it keeps the heat in and it gets hotter faster. So we have hot water. It's steaming. I should say that we'll show you the technique that we use, but the nice thing with the RIT dye, first of all, we've used other types of dyes, but RIT we find works really well for a whole variety of materials, including the nylon fleece we use. When you get the RIT dye, you can open up the box, and inside are all the instructions that you need. So always follow the manufacturer's safety instructions. They talk about stovetop dyeing, they talk about using a washing machine, and what we're doing is sort of akin to stovetop, except instead of putting it on a stovetop, we're putting it on a hot plate, which is basically a portable electric stovetop. So we're going to do 2 parts tan to 1 part pink. So I've already opened the dye that we're going to use, and when you use the powder dye, it comes in a little bag like this that you can just tear open, and you can measure in. Now, if all you want is just tan and you're not necessarily trying to get a certain color, you could just put the whole box in. They have formulas on the box where it says this many pounds of fabric to this, but just over the years we've sort of figured out how much we can dye in a lot, and it seems like if we try to dye more than 2 yards at a time, that's not really worth doing. For a hot tip, if you're making custom fleece for a puppet, for a suit, for a cosplay, whatever you're making it for, you want to dye more than you need, because matching a color is rather challenging, even though that's sort of what I'm attempting to do today. Now, luckily, I don't have to do an exact match. I just have to get it within this color family. All right, so I'm going to start with, I'm going to do 2 to 1. So I'm going to do, I have a half a teaspoon, and I'm going to do 1 scoop of tan, another scoop of tan, so that'll be 1 teaspoon tan. So that's my 2. And then I have my pink here. This is petal pink that we're using. They have a few different pinks. They have fuchsia, petal. You can see we have a few different colors over there on the dye shelf. But I'm going to be using half. By the way, we're using powdered. They also have liquid dyes. And then occasionally we use things from Dharma Trading Company. This is an acid dye. And then we have used Aljo as well. But for people who are just beginning, RIT dye is great. So we've also experimented with the iDye poly. And I tell you, once you get into polyesters, it's challenging. So I don't really recommend it. All right, so it's 2 to 1. So I've already put 2 half teaspoons of tan, and I'll do a half teaspoon of this petal pink. Okay, keep those separate. I'm going to use my spoon, and I'm going to stir thoroughly, because it is a powder. You want to make sure that every bit of that powder is mixed up. You don't want any granules hitting your fabric and dyeing it unevenly. Okay, so it's thoroughly mixed. And I was just mixing that to make sure that is fully saturated. I'm going to put on my gloves. I'm also wearing an apron. Dyeing can be a little messy, so it's always better to, you know, wear clothes that you don't really mind if you get dye splashed on it. Pretty much, I always wear shorts, jeans, and a t-shirt, and I just know that if I'm wearing something in the workshop, there's a chance it could become a workshop shirt. Just the way it is. All right, so I'm going to pull this material out, and I'm going to let a good amount of the water drain right here into this pot. We will also be using this pot to rinse the material after we're finished dyeing, and I'll show you how that works. There are a few things to consider. I'll just talk while this is draining. A few things to consider when you're dyeing fabric. The amount of material you're dyeing, the temperature of the water, and the amount of dye in the dye bath. More time in the water, more dye in the dye bath, hotter water, that will equal a more intense, deeper, richer color. Cooler water, less dye, less time in the bath, you will get a lighter color. And I've actually found with puppet fleeces, except F3, it's rather challenging to get a really deep, intense color, especially black. We have tried really hard to get a black color. I've actually never really succeeded with this softer fleece. With F3 I have though. And it takes pretty much a whole box and a small piece in the hottest water you can manage to get a really intense black that doesn't look blue or purple. All right, so I'm going to squeeze some of this excess water, but it's important that this is uniformly wet. Okay? So now that it's uniformly wet, I'm going to put it into the dye bath, and I'm going to start agitating it right away. Okay? So I'm going to use my gloves and then eventually the tongs to do that. So I'm going to put it in, and I'll just start agitating it right away. You can already see how quickly it's taking up the color, and you can see why you want to use gloves that are heat resistant and also waterproof. I'm going to switch over to the tongs. I'm just going to stir this. Now, what I can see already is the color is looking good, but the intensity, the richness of the color is not what I'm looking for. This would be a great color if I wanted something a very pale peach, but I'm trying to go for a little richer color. But I can see that the 2-to-1 tan to pink is the direction that I want to go. But it's not intense enough. That's fine. I always find that it is better to try and work up to your color slowly, because once you pass the color, you can't do anything to take it back. You can't, I mean, they have dye removers, but very mixed results with that kind of stuff. And it starts to really kind of destroy the material and the integrity of the fabric and blah, blah, blah. So I found that it's best to sort of work your way up in intensity from lighter to darker. Okay, so this is too light, which is fine. It's a great color if you were trying to go for a real pale salmon color. You can see how it's not white and how quick that was. So all that tells me is I need to intensify the color by adding more dye. I'm letting some of this drain out, and then I'm just going to put it into the cool water to essentially hold the process. So it'll be in the water just to keep it from dyeing any further. All right, so we're gonna add more color. So I see what 1 teaspoon did. and a half teaspoon. So I know I'm going to actually do more than that. And I'm going to, let's see, if I just add it again, that'll be what we started with. So I'll do 1, 2. I'm actually going to do 2 more. I'm going to go more up in intensity. So I'll probably get into another box of tan here. Let's try to use all the last granules in this one. Okay. That, and then I'll break into a new box and get one more. Okay, so that's twice what I started with. So that's 4 of those, which means I'll want to do 2 of our petal pink. Get into the bottom of this one, so let's just pour a little in. That's 1. Let's see if I have enough. Almost enough. I think that should probably do it. So once again, once the dye is put in, you want to stir. Make sure it's very well incorporated. Something else you can do is to intensify your color, you can add salt into your dye bath. Not sure how that works, but I know that it does. We've used that occasionally. Usually we're able to get the colors without too much monkeying around with salt and such. Okay, so like before, I'm gonna drain the water out, make sure it's going in uniformly wet. So, you guys can remember what we're starting with here. Kind of squeezing the water out, but I'm not like wringing it out. So this is this color we're starting with, this sort of blush pink or a light salmon. And we'll see how it goes in and comes out after this next run. It really, honestly, it takes seconds. So I'm going to put it in, and I'm going to start agitating it right away. I'll use the tongs. So it goes in. Start moving it around to evenly incorporate all of the color. Any fabric that settles at the bottom is exposed to more heat, and that'll be more intense. So I'm stirring around. What you want to do is check the color periodically. Whenever it's wet, it's darker in appearance, and your final material is going to be dry. So it's good to pull it up, squeeze the water out so you can see where you really are. And I can see I'm still too light, which is fine. Darker than it was, but still not dark enough that I'm getting the color that I want. And that's okay. I would rather be working towards that color than to have totally passed it by. But one thing I'm seeing is to get the sort of like peachy tone I'm going for, a tan and petal pink is a good approach. Now, depending upon the skin tone you're going for, you might be using a coral for the pink, or maybe you're putting a little bit of light brown in. You'll need to experiment with different colors and different combinations that will give you the result you're looking for. So I'm just kind of mixing around here. I'm going to keep it in the water a little longer this time, see if I can get it to take more of that mixture of the dye and the water, get it into those fibers. All right, I can tell I'm going to need more, which is fine. Maybe the third round to do it. All right. So now I'm going to pull. Let it drain. By the way, yes, this water's hot. You can probably see the steam coming off the material. And this does take a certain amount of physical strength to do, so just be aware. And especially when you're doing 2 yards. I mean, if you're doing half a yard, it's a little easier. Like I said, always better to have a little extra. Put it back into the clear, cool pot. Just kind of freeze the process. Okay. Whew! It's a bit of a workout, I'm not going to lie. Okay, so we're going to add more. Let's get crazy. Petal pink. I'm going to need a new one. And I already have tan opened. All right. Formula is working. So I'm going to go 1, 2. Now remember, we're adding to what we have. So I'm going to keep the formula the same as before. This is just I moved to 1 teaspoon. I'm still going to go 2 teaspoons of tan, 1 teaspoon of pink. And I haven't been keeping track, but if I were to keep track, I could go back and say, okay, all told, I needed a total of this many teaspoons. Who knows? Maybe it ends up being 1 package tan, half package of pink. But this is the more art than science portion of it, so we probably could keep notes, but usually we don't. All right. But you might consider that. You might consider keeping a little notepad by, especially if you're thinking a character you might want to replicate. So now I'm going, I already did 2 teaspoons tan, I'm going to 1 teaspoon petal pink. Okay, into the pot. And you probably know this process by now, which is stir it up. You can also, once you get into dyeing, there's techniques you can use that are more advanced. Like you can do things like over dye. For example, one way we've discovered to get a really great, brilliant green color is start with an aljo yellow, like lemon yellow, and get the most intense lemon yellow you can, and then put it in, once it's yellow, put it in a little splash of turquoise. So you can kind of play around with that kind of stuff. So it has all the vibrancy, for example. We made a really cool dinosaur puppet for Noggin, and which you can see on our demo reel if you want to see it in action. And it needed to have fluorescent colors, and so that's when we got some of these, like we literally got fluorescent yellow. So we took this fluorescent yellow, and then we would add in just a little bit of Kelly green, and then that created the effect of having like a really neon green. But most of it was the yellow coming through. Okay? So you experiment. You play around with that kind of stuff. Just always follow the directions. Work carefully. Work safely. All right, so you can see it looks great when it's wet. And that's kind of what I'm going for. So we're going to put it in, and we're going to see if we can get a shade darker. So we started with a real kind of pale color. We're now about a few shades up from that. So like before, I take the wet material out of this rinse bucket, rinse pot, squeeze some of the excess moisture out, because we also don't want to bring in so much moisture that we're diluting our dye pot. And I'm going to put it in and start moving it right away. Start agitating. Agitating, open the fabric up, make sure the dye has the access to all parts of the fabric evenly. Now, if you're using a smaller dye pot and a smaller bit of fabric, this could be a little easier. it is important. Now this is a lobster pot. You can get these at like Smart and Final. It is important to make sure that your material has enough room to move in the water. It can't be hemmed in. It needs to be able to agitate freely. You can see if I push this all the way down, there's quite a bit of room for the fabric to move in the water. Okay, so I'm going to do a little squeeze test, see where we're at. Still pretty light. All right, I'm going to keep it in here longer. I'm going to take a seat here. I'm going to keep this agitating, and we're going to do this for a couple of minutes. Sometimes, actually, if I can have that stool right there, this will be good. Sometimes I feel like Charlie's mom in original Charlie and the Chocolate Factory movie. She's doing the laundry. So while I am doing this, I would happily entertain any questions regarding fabric dye or puppet building. So if any questions you all want to ask, and I'm going to keep agitating and checking, and then if it's still not intense enough, you know what I'm going to do. I'm going to add in more dye, and we'll keep this process going. So if there are questions coming in, go ahead and ask. And one thing you can get going too with dyeing fabric, once you kind of get more skilled at it, is creating ombre effects. And that's where you take one material and you dye it one color, and then you over dye with a second material, but you don't put it all the way in the material. You just kind of slowly, lower it into the material until you have maybe half of it in there and create an ombre effect.
So we have a question. Someone wants to know, where do you source your materials from?
Thank you for asking. Where do you source the materials from? Things like Rit dye, pretty common. I mean, you can get it on Amazon. Back in the day, we'd get it at Joann's. But you can find Rit dye at most drugstores, and also fabric stores, and Michael's Arts and Crafts. As far as our fleece, this fleece is from, I believe, either Georgia Stage or Dharma Trading. One of those two sources. And that seems to be a really good source for getting puppet fleece. I know F3 is sold through Dharma. And this puppet fleece might be as well. All right, I'm going to check it. All right. Still a little light, but we're in the right color family. We're just not in the right intensity yet. I'm going to actually check against my sample. Thanks. Oh, we're getting close. Yeah, they're definitely neighbors. So I'm going to keep it in here a little longer. And then I am going to do, this would be the initial pass. It would be 1, 2, 3. So it'll be a fourth pass with color. I know it's a little more time consuming, but like I said before, once you get it too dark, you can't go back from there. So you have to accept that it's too dark, or build up slowly. We have another question.
What do you do with materials that are the wrong color if you dye 2 yards of it?
Great question. In fact, a little peek behind the curtain. Yesterday, I dyed 2 yards of this material, and when all was said and done, it was too light. And what I decided to do is, instead of over dyeing it to get it darker, which I could have done, I just put it aside and said, you know what, for another day. We're going to be glad that we have this 2 yards of material. And now I'm going to dye another 2 yards to make it darker. So dyed material will always find a project. In fact, whenever we work on projects of any size or scale or any client, large or small, the first place we shop is in our warehouse of materials. So We have bins of furs and fleece from a variety of projects. We keep the scraps, we keep the small pieces, and that's the first place we look. You know, have we already purchased a fur that's perfect for this project? So this will be used, anything left over or anything misdyed will be used for something else. By the way, we even have some fleece material that was dyed and it came out blotchy. It was just the way it happened, and there's no way to fix it. And we use that for patterning. So there's always some use for a material that's unused. I'm going to squeeze and check my color now.
What will this fleece be used for?
This is going to be a little person puppet. We do custom puppets. I'm sure some of you know this, or maybe some of you don't. We make custom puppets for clients of all sizes, big and small. And one thing we've been doing more of is actually making portrait puppets, which has been a lot of fun. If you want information about that, you can check our website. But this will eventually be a portrait puppet. All right. I'll let this go for a few more minutes because I'm seeing some good things happening. And we're getting close. I'm squeezing to check to see the real color. One of the more challenging colors that I dyed was years ago. We got to make puppet versions of The Simpsons, and we had to dye that yellow Simpsons color, and it was actually for an episode of The Simpsons. And that's a very specific yellow, very specific. So trying to get multiple runs of fleece to come out and be that very specific color, because we were making the whole family and a few other characters, Mo and Mr. Burns and such, Jasper and Grandpa, and making that color and make it consistent for lots of puppets, that was challenging. Challenging dye story. All right. Okay, we're getting there. We're getting there. This is awesome. So I'm going to add a little more color, and I think that's going to be the final batch. So let me, I say it might be, who knows? So let's go ahead and drain. All the hot water and as much dye out as possible. Put it in the cool water just to set it for now. Now I can kind of, now that it's off the heat, really squeeze it here. Let's see where we are with that material. So this is what I have. This is what I'm going for. Yep, we're getting close. Half a shade off. Very close. What you don't want to do at this point is get impatient and then pass the mark of the water. So we've had good luck with the way it's been measuring out. So I'm going to do that same measuring. I'm going to go 110. A little extra. 210. One more petal pink. So keeping that 2-to-1 ratio. And I say we don't normally mess around with this, but since we're all here, I can show you. We also keep salt here, and the salt will help intensify the color. And just for demonstration purposes, we'll see. I don't know if it's going to make a huge difference, but I'm going to go ahead and, I'll put 2 teaspoons of salt. All right, so salt does help intensify the color. In fact, I think there's even salt in these dyes. All right. Now, if I pass the color, you guys will have got to see all my mistakes live. That's exciting. Won't that be exciting? Well, you know what? It's like we get people who ask questions on our YouTube, and we appreciate all those questions. Or people ask us questions on our Instagram at Swazzle Puppet Studio. And a lot of questions that people are asking just means they haven't done it enough. Because there's a lot more, like I say, that it's puppetry. There's more art than science to it. And someone might come in and say, oh, well, actually, if you measured this and did that, and that's fine. That's probably great for somebody. But part of the fun of the puppet building process is what we're doing now. The kind of like, well, let's try it. Let's see what happens. What's the worst that can happen? I messed up some fleece? Okay, guess what? I learned, and we'll try again next time. So I've got some salt into it now. More dye. So this would be round 4 or 5. Whoever's counting can let me know, because I've lost count. All right. And it can be tricky because you look at it and go, oh, it's great. But then you squeeze the water out and go, oh, it's not quite there yet. Right? So let's see. Once again, if anything, you'll see this process repeat a few times and you'll realize, because we do demonstrate this in some of our shorts, but I think it's helpful to see the whole process because editing can hide a lot of the actual process. We did a short where we showed how to make our puppet eyes. And then we also did a long form of how to make our puppet eyes. You all should check that out. You can see the difference between the short version and a long form version. We did a short all about using feathers, how to use feathers to make puppet hair. Check it out. It's our most popular short. And we are planning to do a long form of that, making puppet hair with feathers. All right. So here's where we are. This is where we're heading. Let's hope we don't pass our destination. I'm going to keep it in here not as long this time, but I'm going to put it in, start agitating right away. All about agitating. All right. I'm already squeezing and checking. I think this is going to do it. Get the tongs. Gloves are heat resistant, not heat proof. See how I kind of just do it naturally where I pick it up and always squeezing. Sometimes the color in the pot is the color you wish you could get. All that means is longer time in the bath, more intense dye, hotter water. This water is pretty darn hot. Getting there really close. I'm going to keep it in here for a few minutes. I'm about to check it with the material. Yeah, I won't keep it in for a few minutes. We'll see. So let's find a nice spot. Squeeze out the excess moisture. I'm going to check it with our material that we're trying to match. Goody good. We're almost there. A little longer on this. Now the truth is these two materials will not be seen side by side, and they're not for the same puppet. It's just this is the color that I'm attempting to get. So if it was for the same puppet, that's really hard. That just takes a lot of time. A lot of time.
We have a question.
Okay.
Here's someone just joined the feed. Can anyone catch me up a little? I heard salt, but that's all I know. Haha. I know there's something called alum people who put to make fibers take more dye, but maybe that's just wool. I don't know. We don't know. So maybe a little recap on what we're doing.
So just a recap for anyone who's joining, we are dyeing puppet fleece. We're using RIT dye. It's a 2-part tan to 1-part petal pink. And we're trying to get a sort of peachy tone. And this is what we're sort of getting right now. And we're looking very close. And I put the salt in just to intensify the color, and that's one thing you can do to help the fibers open up and accept more color. So that sort of brings you up to speed. And this whole video will be posted. So if folks want to watch it in its entirety, you can do that. And also, if you are watching it and still have questions, comment. We do check those comments. We do answer the questions to the best of our ability. And yeah, all that. All right, so I'm going to squeeze it, check it. Yeah, I think we're good. It looks pretty good. I see a few little differences, but for our purposes, I think it's really good. If I keep it in there a little longer. So I'm just gonna, I don't see like, and right now I'm not in danger of passing the color, which is good. I'm just gonna keep it in here longer, maybe 5 more minutes or so. If anyone has questions, now would be a good time.
Here's a question.
Go ahead.
Someone says, fascinating, thank you. I'm always worried if I dye something, it'll fade once it's been passed on to someone else. But I know I shouldn't that shouldn't put me off trying.
Yes, you should try and experiment with it. Get comfortable with the technique. Will a dyed fabric fade? Yes. In fact, when we were making the puppets for season 5 and 6 of Crank Yankers, we are actually given some original puppets that had been kept in an open window, or a window without blinds. And so that fleece had been exposed to sunlight, and where it was exposed to sunlight for years and years, it did fade. So that's something to consider, but you probably shouldn't be storing your puppets in direct sunlight anyway. And you know, we have puppets here that we've made years and years and years ago, and we don't notice that they're super faded. So, however, I would say our new Avenue Q puppets that we're making, we are using polar fleece for those, just because the dyeing of the fleece and the way those puppets are used in a stage production, the amount of time to dye the fleece and the effort it takes to dye didn't really seem like it was worth it, considering the puppets are going to be viewed on stage. They're not going to be viewed up to the camera. So all of the advantages of having a hand-dyed fleece sort of dissipate once you're 2 rows back. So choose your material based on the project, you know. Is any other questions about puppetry or materials or fleece or dyeing or fabric? Feel free to ask. If not, I'm just going to keep this process going. I'm going to check. I think we're going to be good. All right. So, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this out. Letting the water, excess water, drain out. Squeezing. And I'm going to put it into my rinse bucket. I'm going to unplug my hot plate. One thing we always are very concerned about is making sure hot plates, glue guns, irons, and anything in the workshop that's plugged in is unplugged. So we're really concerned about it. Sometimes we'll unplug it and take a picture of the plug just laying there. So we know, yes, actually, it was unplugged. Nothing worse than getting home and thinking, did I unplug the glue gun? All right, so I'm just putting it in this rinse, agitating it through. All right, now let the water drain out of it. Now the next step of the process, I'll just describe to you, and then maybe we'll put a finished picture up on our Instagram. But the next thing I'm going to do is squeeze as much water out as possible, because then I'm going to take this to a washing machine and do a rinse cycle. Now, you can also just wring the material out, hang it up to dry. That works too. But I found that getting just a rinse cycle, 20-minute rinse cycle, is a good way to remove any excess dye. Also, because it's a rinse and spin, it will spin most of the water out. And usually, I will line dry it after that. So, I don't really want to just put that through the dryer.
Here's a question someone has, which is, after it dries, and you find it's too light,
Yeah.
can you re-dye it?
Answer is yes. Yes, you can. You can over dye it if it's too light. Like I said, this is the darkest it'll look. It will only be lighter once it's fully dry. However, if I look at my sample, I look at my material, considering this is still wet, I'm actually pretty happy with where we are. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get one of those white buckets. Got a bin here. I'll transfer this to a washing machine and do a rinse and spin cycle. And watch for the pictures of our final fleece coming up on our Instagram. At Swazzle Puppet Studio if you're not already following. If you aren't following us here, please follow us, subscribe to our channel, get the alerts. We're trying to grow this channel. We're trying to provide interesting content. We have some really fun ideas for some upcoming YouTube videos. So like they say, like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time in the Swazzle Puppet Studio. Goodbye!